Hey, what's up, everyone? Nicky Skevich here with Daily Fantasy Winners. Got the next episode of Tee to Green here. And for this week, it is the AT&T Byron Nelson, a tournament that's played in Irving, Texas at the TPC Four Seasons Resort. And a couple quick things about this tournament in terms of the details. Schedule-wise, it is the first of two Texas tournaments that builds up to the Memorial Tournament. If you are new to Daily Fantasy or just DFS golf or just and golf in general, I guess I should say, with the PGA. The Memorial Tournament is in a not over Memorial Day weekend. It's the tournament, or it's the weekend after Memorial Day weekend, which is a little weird now, the way the schedule works out. But in any case, that is a big PGA Tour tournament that's not a major or WGC events. It's not quite the Players Championship quality, but it's a very strong field. It's Jack Nicklaus's like invitational, basically. And so this is kind of like a build-up for it. And this is the week after the Players. So it is a weaker field this week in terms of the strength of it overall. But at the top of the field, there are some decent players in it. Dustin Johnson's in it, Jason Day's in it, Jordan Spieth's in it, Sergio's in it, Brooks Koepka's in it. So we've got some good players in it. It's just, it kind of drops off a little bit there after that with some decent players, a few decent players, but like it's just overall quality when you talk about full strength top to bottom. It's just not a very good strength of the field, so it's pretty weak in the 7-6K range on DraftKings, 5K, 4K on FanDuel. And so because of this, the stronger players usually do well here. Sometimes you get in these tournaments where you see a strong top of the field and then it gets a little bit weaker, but it's on a golf course or it's being played in weather conditions where there can be a certain amount of variance that you could just easily come into play. And sometimes the stronger players can just, there's just more variance of where they could maybe just actually have like a pretty bad week. That usually does not happen here. This is usually a pretty scoreable course. And so by default, the better players usually do well here. And so I'll get on to that a little bit more in the strategy section. So details about the golf course, though. It tips out at 7,166 yards, and it is a par 70. It's about, it's about an average length course for a par 70 or so. There's only two par 5s on the golf course because it is a par 70. They can both be eagled. You probably want to focus on longer hitters here, though, when it comes to the eagles. They're both only about 545 yards or so. And it's not to say like only longer hitters can eagle each of the par 5s, but it is, in comparison to some of the other tournaments we've been talking about, length will definitely play an edge here in terms of your likelihood to get eagles here, more so than the average week. It's not the biggest difference in the world, but it's definitely stronger than average. We'll put it that way. And so you'll want to focus on length a little bit with the picks, and we'll get, again, like I said, a little more into this in the strategy. A couple other quick details about the golf course. There are a fair amount of holes that do have water or even some out of bounds on the golf course, but usually the trouble is pretty far offline. You have to hit a pretty erratic tee shot, basically, a lot of the times if you're going to get into trouble on this course. There are a couple holes where it comes into play, like a little bit more than others, certainly. But at the same time, by comparison, and certainly in comparison to last week, there isn't a lot of trouble on this golf course overall. This is why the winning score here usually every year is at least in the mid-teens, sometimes in the upper teens, under par. So just by regular PGA Tour standards, this is a pretty easy golf course, all things considered. And so that's why, like I said, the stronger players usually do well here every year. If you're going to get a kind of a weak field top to bottom, and then you're going to have a pretty easy golf course to boot where there's just not a lot of variance, the stronger players are just going to do pretty well here consistently. It's kind of that simple. And so strategically, as far as lineup building and just what we should be focusing on here. So yeah, like I usually do, I usually go out, just kind of read up or listen up into some different people's just content, and always like doing it because there's some great content out there and everything like that. And they're always going to be similar opinions. There's going to be different opinions out there. But I found fascinating this week. There seemed to be a lot of different advice, or just in terms of the kind of golfers you should be focusing on or what statistics you should be focusing on. It just seemed like a lot of people were doing research this week and they were finding different conclusions. So that what I found was a little bit fascinating. But from everything I did from research is that this is definitely a strokes gained tee to green course and a strokes gained off the tee course. That usually seems to prevail here. And that actually is usually the case here, in my opinion, because Usually, I mean, strokes gained off the tee obviously there's a couple factors that go into that, but usually the ball, like you're usually going to have longer hitters do well in the strokes gained off the tee. The longer hitters are normally going to be more toward the top on the strokes gained off the tee categories, and usually the strokes gained tee to green. They're usually going to be good drivers of the golf ball overall, but they're also going to be longer hitters as well. And so if you have a course that doesn't have a ton of trouble off the tee, then obviously the longer hitters are, generally speaking, are going to have a little bit more of an advantage. So I think it really is that kind of clear cut. Just taking a look at a lot of the last handful of leaderboards and just running the statistics across all the people near the top of the leaderboards, we're getting strokes gained off the tee and strokes gained tee to green that pops up kind of the most of everything. Driving distance pops up a little bit over driving accuracy, but there are some shorter hitters who have done well here in the past, like Zach Johnson and Jason Duffner have usually have had some good results here in the past. And it's not like shorter hitters are off limits. I don't want to make it sound like that, but overall with your lineup building, because of the strength of, or because of the eagle advantage you can get with longer hitters, and because of what it's saying about strokes gained off the tee and tee to green, longer hitters are preferred, and you should probably make sure you at the minimum half of your lineup, I would say, should be decent length to longer length hitters. And you can go more than that if you want, depending on how many lineups you're making and everything like that, and how it all fits, obviously, of course, like that as well. Yeah, I think we're done as far as the strategy goes. The one thing about strategy I was just going to say here, as it comes to the pricing, this is a little bit more with DraftKings, because FanDuel, you can do so many different kinds of strategy. It's hard to tell what everyone's going to do each week. But with DraftKings in particular, with the way the strength of this field and the prices work out, we're going to probably see a lot of people go high-low strategy this week, in my opinion. Just because, like I said, the stronger players usually do well here, and there's actually some decent value in that in the kind of that 10K, 9K range, so to speak. So I think you're going to see a lot of people try and grab 2 or 3 of those guys and then jump down to 3 of that 7K range, just because of the way the salaries start, the lower 7K, maybe even the upper 6K range, just because it's kind of a mess down there a little bit. But so in any case, I do think that is the right strategy. It doesn't mean you have to go super high-low, but I do think you're going to see more people go with that. But I'm going to dive in a little bit to the strategy here in a second here when I get into the end of the pick segment. So we'll move on to the picks. So with the 5 guys that are above 10,000 on DraftKings, and the 5 most expensive on FanDuel, it's just 9,500 and up on FanDuel. Dustin Johnson's clearly the most expensive. He's 12.5 on DraftKings. He's 11.8 on FanDuel. He's 4.5 to 1, depending on what sportsbook you look at. Of course, he's 4.5 to 1 to win the golf tournament. As somewhat insane as that sounds, that anybody should be 4.5 to 1 to win a golf tournament right now, given the way this field sets up and given that it's this tournament, that's actually probably pretty fair. That's a pretty fair price that the books are probably asking for, actually, given the way Dustin is playing right now. And so it basically to say is I think Dustin would win here 1 out of every 4 times. That's probably pretty fair. And so, but he is so expensive just because than the other golfers, and he's 12.8 on DraftKings in particular. That is, he's a little bit easier to roster on FanDuel, but he's still a decent jump. But I would just say use him in GPPs, don't use him in cash, just so you can make sure you get at least a handful or a small chunk of the more expensive guys, so you're not just going DJ and then you're just stranded on all 7K golfers from that point on, or if you're forced to dive into multiple times into the 6K range. That's just not that's not good this week for your cash building lineup when you want to get 6 of 6 through the cut. So would lay off on Dustin on cash, but GPPs, absolutely, you're going to want to use them some if you're doing multiple lineups. As far as the other 4 guys, Sergio, Jason, Jordan, and Brooks. I guess I should call them by their last names. I don't know why I do that. But anyways, I really think there's good reason to think that all 4 of them will do well here. It's really hard differentiating between the 4. Sergio's playing the best of the 4 right now, and his ball striking is obviously just phenomenal right now, despite his poor Sunday round at the Players. Spieth usually does well in the Texas tournaments, and even though the driving accuracy and strokes gained off the tee isn't great for him lately, since you can't get in too much trouble off the tee, it won't hurt him as much, if that makes sense, with Jordan, and he's just so good with the putter and his approach shots that I would be shocked if he top 20 very safely, I would say, this week for Jordan. I'd be shocked if he was outside of that, because he's very good statistically still in other areas. And then we take a look at Brooks Koepka, who's back in really good form like we expected. That was a weird start to the year for him, and obviously he has the really good length as well for the Eagles, and the tee to green game. And then Jason Day is just great value, in my opinion, particularly on DraftKings, obviously being the cheapest of the bunch I just mentioned. And so it's really hard for me to pick one between those four. So if you really want me to pick like one or two, I will. But I'm just saying it's very it's like gun to the head type of a thing. Like I really don't even want to pick one of these guys above the other because I think there's good reason to use all of them, in certain regards. And so I would just say Jason Day on DraftKings is particularly appealing because of the price, and Brooks Koepka is also the same result or the same reasoning for FanDuel at 9,500. And obviously, you can use him in rounds 3 and 4 if you're going to do that. Obviously, on FanDuel because you want to use the more expensive players on rounds 3 and 4 to increase your chances of getting the most holes with the more likelihood of making the cut, essentially. And so. That's what I would do. Koepka's, just strictly the price on FanDuel and for the length and the Eagles. For Day, his ownership's just not high any week at all, and he's playing good golf. He's just had it seems like every tournament he has one stretch where it's just really bad, and that's usually a sign. Usually when you see that from a player, if you're playing extremely great golf, but they just have one really bad stretch and it happens a couple times in a row, that usually just means they're very close, and it means they're going to there's nothing wrong with them. Usually you're going to find people that are not playing well. They're just erratic all the time, or they're just, having several bogeys, type of a thing over the course of the 4 days, if that makes sense. It's just with Jason, it just seems to be like there's one bad spot over the last handful of tournaments, and that's going to get corrected, I think. Jason, obviously, he bombs it very well. As far as the players, he actually played a pretty good tournament. He's still getting unlucky with the putter from a lot of the things I've watched with him. He's one of the top guys on our strokes gained, or not our strokes gained, excuse me, our putting regression tool on the website at DailyFantasyWinners.com. So that's obviously going for him as well. And I don't know if Sunday there was a Mother's Day thing and his mom's not doing well, and if something crept into him there on Sunday, who knows? I don't even want to speculate on that. I just don't even want to try that. But he seemed to actually just be playing fair, or because it was a very tough course last Sunday, and he just had obviously a handful of penalty strokes right there at the end on 16 and 17. And that one of those shots on 16 was insanely unlucky, in my opinion. And so I just don't look at it too much that the Day is playing as bad as a lot of people are making it out to be, given the bad luck he's had with the putter, and that he's playing really good golf for most of every round. So that tells to me that Day's not like all over the place here. So I think, anyways, long story short, I think he's great value. And you should definitely consider using him. But again, like I said, all of them are good as far as the expensive plays. So just moving down really quickly to the 9K range. The one thing I want to say from strategy building, to tie this into the 9K range. The 9K range probably will go a little bit low owned overall in terms of the field strength. And like I said, the better players usually do well here. And I think a lot of people are going to try and grab Spieth and Day, Sergio and Koepka, something like that. They're going to try and grab two of those top, expensive guys. And so that's going to leave a little bit of ownership gap, in my opinion, in 9K. And one player I really like this week, even though he's kind of expensive on DraftKings, is Tony Finau at 9,200. Only 7,700 on FanDuel. So FanDuel's almost a no-brainer at that price, and I would feel comfortable if I were you putting him in rounds 3 and 4. Obviously, Finau, you see that price and you kind of go, huh? Like, I don't really want to pay that for him. But again, and look, he's played here the last 2 years, and he's had great finishes around top 10s. But that's not even really so much why I'm doing it from the course history standpoint. It's just because his strokes gained off the tee, and he's a bomber. The numbers for him off the tee are absolutely phenomenal in strokes gained tee to green. So it's a good course fit, which is probably why he's had the good course history. It's not a misleading course history, in my opinion. And lastly, I will also say that he's also pretty highly ranked on our PGA putting regression tool. He's been pretty unlucky this year. We should see some positive regression there as well. And so, anyways, hopefully you're seeing this video in time. I'm like, it's actually technically Wednesday morning when I'm recording this. I got to this pretty late Tuesday night. I apologize about that. So hopefully you're not seeing this too late during the day on Wednesday. I will get the list up as quickly as possible tomorrow or later today, I guess, whatever you want to call it. And so apologize about that. I'll try and be better about that next week. And so, but thank you for watching. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. We always appreciate that. And like the video if you find it helpful. And then I'm at Nick Yuskevich on Twitter, of course. And then Daily Fantasy Winners is on Twitter at DFantasyWinners. All right, thanks, everyone, and good luck.